Before my A-levels, I'd never done any filming before. I had experience with cameras as I'd previously done a lot of photography, but when I first started filming, I thought I'd be able to film portrait and landscape, but you can't film portrait. So I basically had to start again and learn all the different parts of a camera that were associated with filming rather than taking photos. For example, how there is a whole different setting on the DSLR camera for filming. So all the films will be stored in the filming section and the photos in the photo section. I knew some terminology before. For example, I had basic knowledge of the terms long shots and close-up shots, but I'd never heard of a panning shot or the 180-degree rule. So most of the terminology was very new to me. Filming was creating a prelim, and we did this using a DSLR camera and a tripod. We worked individually, and our aim was to create a short film that incorporated continuity editing. We learned the terms, the 180-degree rule, match on action, and shot reverse shot. We were also introduced to Barthes. We were also introduced to Barthes' narrative theory, narrative enigma. The prelim introduced us to these terms and helped us with our understanding of continuity editing, as this was the first we had ever heard of this term. We found out that this is used in many narrative films and TV shows, and it's used to smooth over incoherent discontinuity editing of the editing process and to establish a logical, coherent sequence. This helped to show us what to do when we did our own, as we learn how to use all of these different techniques properly and what not to do. Our planning was minimal, but we did a basic storyboard, no call sheet or screenplay. We only used a few props. For example, I used glasses and a wig, and we stayed in the same location, so no planning was needed there. No casting. Only the person that wasn't in the shot, so wasn't needed, filmed, so everyone swapped round roles, so this also helped with teamwork, as we learn how to work as a team when filming and also editing. No time was spent looking at existing text to see how people have previously done it, so we didn't get any kind of ideas from there or different theories or narrative theories from there, so we came up with everything ourselves. With time management, it was a very quick turnaround, as we did no test shots, we didn't do any pitching, and the editing was very basic. When we were first introduced to Final Cut Pro X, everyone was quite intimidated, as it was a professional piece of software. So there's a lot to it. It's not basic. We only used very simple tools, such as the cut and select tools, just to kind of put it in a coherent sequence. I learned how to import the film from the SD camera onto Final Cut. We only used the tripod, so half of the filming was handheld, so not all the shots were steady. This looked very unprofessional, but we had limited time, and handheld filming is the quickest way of filming. This also limited us to a very small variety of framing and different shot types. And the only audience feedback that we got was if we'd filmed it well and edited it properly. The second task was creating a Swede. We first watched the existing film example from the film opening of the warp film Tyrannosaur, directed by Paddy Considine. Our aim was to recreate the storyline, but we were turning the warp style opening into the style of a working title film. By doing this, we flipped it from a niche audience to a mainstream audience. We researched into the contrasting approaches of the commercially produced films by working title. which primarily centre around the widening of their audience, appeal beyond the UK. They do this by using a few approaches, but one is using the widely recognised stereotype of an upper-class, handsome, well-dressed man from the south of England, usually London, as this is a worldly recognised ideal. We transform the drunken, old, heavily accented character into this British ideal stereotype, much like the Hugh Grant kind of esque character, which is seen in many of Richard Curtis's box office successes. Richard Curtis films with working title have reached around about 1.5 billion, edging to 2 billion now. So very successful due to their wide audience, as their films appeal to a world audience. His films include Love Actually and Four Weddings and a Funeral. Warp Style is more focused on giving a positive representation to minorities and underprivileged that would be invisible or negatively stereotyped otherwise. We transformed the dirty and vulgar opening, full of swearing, into an upper-class man drinking wine and using light profanity such as the word swine, rather than the countless swear words that are used in the Tyrannosaur opening. We tried using the props and locations at our disposal to recreate the opening, but we were extremely limited to Ben's suit from home, a plastic cup and a toy dog. Even though we were an indie film company, much like Warp, we didn't have the proficient funds or time to accurately recreate this to how we wanted it. We created a detailed storyboard. We created a detailed storyboard, and we had a call sheet this time, but still we didn't have a screenplay, and everything was directed by word of mouth, so we didn't write anything down. But this was a step up from our prelim. More locations were used, so we planning needed to go into that, as we didn't just have inside locations, we had also outside locations. So we needed a backup if it started raining, so we needed to figure out where we would relocate to, but luckily it just didn't happen when we filmed. Still we didn't pitch, but we had a more in-depth discussion about what we wanted, and again we didn't do any test shots, but we did film multiple takes at different angles, so this was a step up from our prelim and helped us to extend our knowledge of shot types, and helped us with this we're putting them to practical use. So this helps with our understanding of these terms. We didn't have any casting, but we didn't have time to do that due to our limited time. But this time we took shorter shots, shorter takes, which was more professional, and this time we took some cutaway shots, which are used to break up the action. We also were introduced to the boom mic, and we learned how this helps to improve the sound quality and how it can record ambient sound. So this is a step up again, as this time we use sound. The editing in this process was a lot more developed than we did before. We used a lot more of the tools available to us on Final Cut Pro. We used so the sound tools. We used sound effects, and this time we used different visual effects on the film, and again it just had a more professional look. We got slightly more audience feedback, but still not full audience feedback. Again, it was just kind of if we'd filmed it right and how our editing style was. Through this I learned a lot about framing and how it's best to frame it. Before I didn't really understand what the different terms were. This time, after learning a lot more about them and putting them to use. I learned a lot more about them, and I also learned um, how manipulating the mise-en-scene anchors a preferred reading. So with this, through Ben's costume of a suit and tie, this helped anchor our preferred reading that he was an upper class man. Yeah, and we were also introduced to, we'd already heard of the narrative theory of narrative enigma, but we were introduced to Todorow's narrative theory and structure. So this was the equilibrium. The equilibrium at the beginning was him simply walking up the steps with a glass of wine. The disruption was him tripping over the dog, but we didn't really have a new equilibrium, as it was all a bit hectic after that, because he buries the dog and then rushes into the classroom where Paige is, who tries to help him. So that's kind of a new equilibrium, but we didn't really get to that stage. Levi-Strauss' binary opposites. We learnt about that through learning about the different film companies, film production companies. That was binary opposites of the Hugh Grant style character and the main protagonist in Tyrannosaurus. That's binary opposites. And props, character archetypes. So that again was the Hugh Grant style character. So through this I've learned a lot of new terminology, and this helped me a lot to know what I wanted to do with my real film, and helped me to progress to the stage where I was ready to start filming. Pre-production started with us being introduced to our concept, which was a 2-minute film, short film opening. Individually, we went away and came up with an idea to fit this concept. We had to think about a suitable location, cast, if we could compare it to an existing film product to see if there was a pre-existing market. We needed to specify our genre and the outline of the plot. There were 3 pitches, but we couldn't decide on one, so me and Paige did a fourth pitch, and we decided on this. It was a hybrid genre of a rom-com and social realist film, which was heavily influenced by the film Submarine. We then did a genre research of both rom-com and social realist. This included the history of the genre, the conventions, and the target audience. We then did 6 film opening analyses. This helped us to look at the existing products and how we could incorporate some of the ideas into our film, for example Submarine, which heavily influenced our film. We also looked at Breakfast on Pluto. We took inspiration from the title. The title looked like handwriting, as it was swirly. This signified that it could be a rom-com, as it was very feminine. However, its dark grey colour, instead of signifying a rom-com, which would usually have bright colours, signified a social realist film, as grey is a more serious colour. In this film, the title was used to create exposition of the character. However, in our film, our title was used to signify the genre, as we used swirly handwriting as well, to connote its rom-com genre. However, unlike Breakfast on Pluto, our white and black colour signified the serious social realist side to it, instead of creating exposition of the character. Also, we looked into the conventions of rom-coms, and we chose the idea of a love triangle. However, we put a social realist spin on it by using a heterosexual and homosexual love interest, so it is unconventional.